Yo, what's going on everyone? This your boy Rob BZ, always making things easy like Pokemon videos. Yo, so I was thinking, since I love Pokemon so much, I bet you guys are wondering, what are my favorite Pokemon? Well, I'm glad to tell you, in this top 20 countdown of my favorite Pokemon of all time. Now here's how it's all going to go down. I'm going to be splitting the video into two parts. The first part is going to be from numbers 20 to 11. The next part is going to be from 10 to number 1. Since I don't want to bore you guys too much by lumping it all together to a single video, I'm going to go ahead and split it right down the middle. That way it could be easily watchable in about 15 minutes or so. Now there's two conditions I'm going to be following regarding this top 20 list. Number 1, I'm not going to have any legendary Pokemon on this list. If you're interested in knowing my favorite legendary Pokemon, I'll talk about it in a future video, probably in the top 10 list. Number 2, although I will be talking about stats in this top 20 video, they mainly do not affect my liking or my favoritism towards that particular Pokemon. So let's get started with this countdown to number 20. He's number 18 on the National Pokedex. Say hello to Pidgeot from Generation 1. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh my god, it's Bird Jesus! Praise Bird Jesus! Praise the Helix! And I just got one thing to say to that, so let me get on my hipster status right quick, get my hipster glasses on, and let me tell you that I was using Bird Jesus before it was called Bird Jesus, alright? Now if you love Twitch Plays Pokemon, have at it, Haas. Go for it, it's America after all. But to me, Twitch Plays Pokemon is just fundamentally flawed. I understand the theory, but in practice it's just complete and utter chaos. Now that I got my spiel for Twitch Plays Pokemon out of the way, let's talk more about Pidgeot. Now, back in the day, during Gen 2 with Gold, Silver, and Crystal versions, I was using Pidgeot on the regular. I always had him on my team because, for the most part, he was a very balanced Pokemon. He had decent attack stats and pretty good defenses, which I can't say the same for Fearow or Dodrio, which are clearly have higher attack power than Pidgeot ever had. But at the same time, I did actually like my defense, and it could actually match speed. So I always had it on my team, not only for flying purposes to help me fly from place to place, but also as a very useful Pokemon for me. Speaking of stats, let's take a look at them right quick. As you can see, the speed stat is pretty decent, but the rest of them are kind of lackluster when you compare them to other bird Pokemon stats that you can get at the beginning of your adventure. But suffice to say, back in the day, Pidgeot was actually pretty good Pokemon to use because they didn't have a complicated IV system like they do now, where it was, I think, around 15 or 16 instead of 31 like it is today. I vaguely remember Pidgeot in the anime, probably because Ash only had it for a brief time, I believe for like 2 or 3 episodes before he actually let it go. I mean, he had it as a Pidgeotto for some time, but after it evolved into Pidgeot, he just let it go for some reason. So anyway, of course, if you also remember, his rival, Gary motherfucking Oak, also had a Pidgeot, who Gary Oak was inspired from. Green also had a Pidgeot, especially when you faced him in the Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow games. Now, there's no monkeying around with this next Pokemon, coming in at number 19. He's a feisty fire and fighting type. It's Infernape from Generation 4. I remember back when I played Pokemon Diamond for the first time, I was using an Infernape, and he was one of the more powerful Pokemon in my party at that time. I was interested in not only Infernape, but also Dialga, too. That's why I chose Diamond over Pearl back then. And it was kind of funny because also back then there was very little choice in fire types in the Sinnoh Pokedex, and it was very weird. It was really weird for the time. It was even strange for one of the Elite Four members of the Sinnoh region, Flint, who barely had like Infernape and a Rapidash, and all the rest of his Pokemon were Steelix. Infernape's really useful as a mixed sweeper. If you don't know what that is, it means he can be good at physical attacks and special attacks too. Usually you won't have any room for status moves, but you can always have a mix of physical and special attacks. And Infernape does have that, as you can see in the stats here. It's very speedy and it's very well balanced attack wise. Well, of course defenses are kind of low, but that's kind of expected for him. Now in the anime, to be honest, I really didn't watch much of Diamond and Pearl and all the rest of the later series in Pokemon. Now I know it's gotten a little better recently with Pokemon X and Y. Ash's Infernape was formerly a Chimchar that belonged to this douchebag named Paul. Let's not talk about him because he's a real douchebag. But anyway, he had abandoned his Chimchar after he thought he was weak. So Ash ended up picking him up. It's kind of funny because I think, if you notice, there's a Blaze ability with Chimchar, and it's really apparent, especially as it evolves through into Monferno and Infernape, that, you know, it loses control, it gets in a rage, and it's kind of indicative of all the bullshit he went through with Paul. Now, blowing in with a stream of sand at number 18, he's the only rock and dark type in existence. Say hello to Tyranitar from Generation 2. Tyranitar has always been an elusive Pokemon to me, primarily because you always get him towards the end of your adventure in Gold, Silver, and Crystal when you go into Mount Silver. Now, it's awesome Pokemon, don't get me wrong, and my greatest memory with Tyranitar was when I faced off against him in Pokemon Coliseum as a Shadow Pokemon, who was under the control of the boss of Team Snag'em, Evice, who it was impersonating the mayor of the first town you went to in the Ore region, which is really what a twist that was. So, and Tyranitar was especially useful because of his new ability, Sandstream, which started up a sandstorm every time it entered battle. And of course nowadays, it only lasts for 5 turns in X and Y. I also remember how much of a badass Tyranitar was during the anime, especially during the Pokemon Forever movie. That was legit. I was also pleasantly surprised that he ended up getting a Mega Evolution. That was quite a shock to me, and looking at its stats, it looked like it got a pretty much decent improvement all around, especially in its defense category. That shot up like a rocket. So, all in all, Tyranitar is really a badass Pokemon. That's why he's one of my favorites. Next, flying in at number 17, you can get this Pokemon from Old Amber. It's Aerodactyl from Gen 1. Now, unfortunately, I didn't use Aerodactyl very much back in the day when he first came out in Red, Blue, and Yellow. But as time went on in the Pokemon series, as later games, he actually got a little bit better, got a little more moves in his moveset, because he had very little moves, like in the beginning. You basically had to supplement him with TMs. But Aerodactyl was pretty fast Pokemon for Rock and Flying type. He was just pretty good overall. I remember when Lance always had an Aerodactyl on his team, and I also remember back in the anime he was a real bitch to Ash and friends. Nowadays, since he has a Mega Evolution now, it's crazy. His Mega Evolution is pretty cool, I gotta say. As you'll notice in his stats here, he's got boosted stats all around when it comes to his original form up to his Mega form. So it's really a good opportunity to use Aerodactyl nowadays in 6th Gen. And also his Mega Evolution kinda looks like a certain basketball player, plays for the Houston Rockets, he's a shooting guard. Oh, what's his name? Something with James? I can't remember. Anyway, moving on now, we're going to number 16, and oh, this one's flying in too. It's Talonflame from Gen 6. Now, Talonflame is a pretty special Pokemon in my eyes, because in my opinion, it's probably one of the most well-received, starting early in your adventure bird Pokemon that's in the competitive scene. And that's really saying something considering the fact that you rarely see any other early starting adventure bird Pokemon like Pidgey or Swallow or any other early starting bird Pokemon in your adventure. So with Talonflame, the only reason I believe it's in the competitive scene so much is because of its ability, Gale Wings. Now what Gale Wings does is it gives priority to any flying type move Talonflame has. So for example, let's say Talonflame is about to use Brave Bird. With Gale Wings, it can give as much priority as a regular quick attack, which normally has priority 1, and Brave Bird has priority 0. With Gale Wings, Brave Bird is now moved up to priority 1, and usually people will breed Talonflames to be fast and have high attack power. Unfortunately, Talonflame has not had any appearances yet in the anime, although Ash did catch a Fletchling early on in the adventure, and of course it's safe to assume that he'll evolve it into a Talonflame eventually. Now looking at Talonflame's stats right quick, we can easily notice that even though his attack is barely higher than Pidgeot's, it has very fast speed at base 126. So I really like Talonflame. He's starting to become one of my favorites, and it's nice to see a fire and flying type that's not legendary. Alright, so who's up next at number 15, you may ask? Well, all you have to do is not get pinched by its claws. It's Drapion from 4th Gen. I feel it's an odd choice to make, but I actually think Drapion is one of my favorites. There's just something about a giant scorpion that just screams badass. Or also it could be because it's only poison and dark type that actually doesn't suck. Yeah, thanks Skuntank. I remember using Drapion after I got it in Pokemon Diamond, along with that same Infernape, and it was pretty beastly, I gotta say. Physical attack power and speed. And I also remember taking it in Pokemon Battle Revolution, took that Diamond team, and I went through that Castle Coliseum where you had to face like 100 trainers in a row. You barely had any rest, you had to spin like a wheel to see if whoever gets healed or not, which it was crazy, man, but I thoroughly enjoyed that. Got so many battle points out of that. Taking a look at its stats right quick, you notice the attack and speed are decent, but its defense is quite high. Didn't expect it to have great defense, but apparently it does. In the anime, I also remember Drapion being with Paul, that douchebag, and he was actually pretty beastly. Like, he took out 3 of Ash's Pokemon during their battle in the Sinnoh League, which was pretty impressive. Now, strongly flying in at number 14, probably the greatest normal and flying type I've ever seen. It's Braviary from Gen 5. Now, if there's any great representation of America, as much as it is, it has to go to Braviary. It just, wow, this bird is kind of reminds me of the bald eagle. I guess that's what they were going with, but it also kind of reminds me, it's got that Native American vibe to it that I kind of like. And it's really a powerful Pokemon, especially when you have the Sheer Force ability on a Braviary, which Sheer Force allows a move that has a secondary effect to be boosted by 30%, although the secondary effect will be negated. Like Rock Slide, for instance. It'll be 30% more powerful, but you won't be able to flinch anybody. But it's no big deal. Because it gives no shits. Because when it comes to unadulterated power, Braviary represents it like America. Because when it goes in on an opposing Pokemon, it just represents America and how powerful, nice and powerful it is. And when you go out and you say to people, I got a Braviary, because it's American. It's the only American way to use a normal and flying type Pokemon that represents our pastime of baseball, as American as apple pie. Sweet home Alabama, God bless you, Texas! It's all about Braviary in America!
Because when it comes to Pokemon, no one's greater in America than Braviary fighting against a Pidgeot in America.
What
Where
are you
Braviary is the best in the world in America. Where even Captain America is way too American, so he has to fly with a Braviary in America.
Hey, get out of my show! I'm really sorry about that, guys. I promise that won't happen again. So onwards to the next one with number 13. It's Scizor from 2nd Gen. I don't know how many times I've heard people say that they've always wanted a Scizor. Back then, 2nd Gen, it was crazy the hype it got back then. But my greatest memory with a Scizor has to be in 3rd Gen. Ironically enough, it wasn't even 2nd Gen, it was 3rd Gen, when I had raised it not only to level 100 with a team that I built, but I took that team with me to the Pokemon 10th Anniversary Video Game Championships. Now, I didn't win, but I did go twice, once in the Galleria area in Houston, Texas, and another at Space Center Houston. And I actually got a round better in Space Center Houston than I did in the Galleria, but overall it was still a fun experience, and it was just great to use that Scizor. It was just awesome. Nowadays, it's a huge threat in the metagame because of the fact that it has Technician. And what Technician does is it powers up any move that's below 60 base attack power. So it's a very huge threat because it can also learn Bullet Punch, which has base attack power of 40, and it's a priority move, which makes it devastating. And not only that, but its Mega Evolution also has Technician, and it also can learn Bullet Punch, which makes it devastating. Taking a look at his stats, and you can see why he's so devastating. His attack power is through the roof, his defense is through the roof, and it gets even more increased when it Mega Evolves. So it's crazy powerful. That's why people always shit on it, because it's always overused. But it's overused for a reason. As far as the anime is concerned, I don't particularly remember too much in the anime, but I'm sure it was around somewhere. Maybe. Now, coming in at number 12 right now, maybe a little bit of a shocker to you, but it's pretty awesome. Say hello to Victory Bell from Gen 1. I've always liked Victory Bell's design, even more than Vileplume's, because it's a flycatcher Pokemon. It's a Venus flytrap. I mean, from the plant it's inspired from, it's more like that plant that whenever a bug goes inside the opening, the walls are so slippery that the bug will just try and struggle to get out, and it will never get out. And inside the plant, there's juices that are so acidic it'll pretty much dissolve anything inside. So it's pretty scary. Don't get caught in that. I remember I used it a lot during 1st and 2nd Gen because it had good attack stats and special attack stats. Speed, not so much, but unless you had Chlorophyll, which it got Chlorophyll later to help with the speed, but other than that, it was going to be a Slowski. Now, I'm sure everyone remembers James's Victory Bell. That was hilarious. Every time Victory Bell would eat James, and it was just hilarious. I'm surprised James didn't get digested, or at least his head didn't get digested. But it was still funny, and I guess James is sort of like a Pokemon master, because all the grass types he's ever had do that to him. They all chomp on him or poke him if you're Cacnea. So, rounding out part 1 of this list at number 11, it's the only evolution I have on this list. It's Jolteon from Gen 1. Now, I know some other people may have an Umbreon, or an Espeon, or maybe even Sylveon 6th Gen as their favorite evolution, but when it comes to me, Jolteon's got the speed. The real speed. I mean, Espeon's pretty fast too, but Jolteon's got the real speed. It has one of the highest base speed stats in all of Pokemon. That's pretty impressive. Now, being an electrical engineer, I'm actually partial to electric type Pokemon, and Jolteon's no exception. But my greatest memory with Jolteon has to be during 4th gen with the remake of Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Now I had a Jolteon in that team and it was pretty boss. I took advantage of its high special attack and speed and just basically made it a special sweeper, which only uses special attacks and is supplemented usually by 1 or 2 status moves. It also helped the team by having Volt Absorb, its ability, which turned electric attacks into healing recovery points for Jolteon, which was very useful. In the anime, I think there was a couple episodes that had Jolteon in it, but they weren't that memorable, to be honest. So that's the end of my list for part 1. Hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned, part 2 is going to be on its way soon, so keep it right here. I'll probably have a link in the description as soon as part 2 is ready. So until next time everyone, peace y'all, I'm out.